Okay, let's unpack this. Something pretty deliberate, maybe unprecedented, unfolded on April 26th. We're talking at the People's Liberation Army Navy, the plan.
That's right. We're diving into a report about a very public display. They weren't just hinting at things this time.
No, they explicitly identified potential adversaries. Specific ships, even.
Which is, quite fascinating. The directness, this wasn't some vague statement. It happened during an open day in Taihajiang province, I believe.
Yeah, on a Type 052D destroyer, the Nanjing, there was an information board.
And on that board, clear as day, it labeled U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and Japan's Atago-class destroyers as, enemy targets.
Enemy targets. In peacetime, that's a shift.
It really is. Explicitly naming specific warships like that in public. We haven't really seen that before from the plan.
And the timing, too.
Yeah.
April 26th, that's the plan's 76th anniversary. Feels intentional.
Definitely seems like more than just ceremony. A calculated message, perhaps amplified because there was a U.S. naval presence nearby around the same time.
Yeah, right. And central to this display was this weapon system, the YJ-18A anti-ship missile.
Yes, the display basically confirmed it's active now and vertically launched.
Vertically launched, meaning they can fire it off quickly, any direction.
Right.
More responsive.
Exactly. So the YJ-18A itself, what makes it stand out, it's a long-range cruise missile, but it has this kind of dual-mode approach.
Dual mode? How so?
It reportedly cruises subsonic, maybe Mach 0.8 or 0.9.
Yeah.
Just into the speed of sound.
Okay, so relatively slow initially. Why?
That lets it fly really low, sea skimming, basically below the radar horizon for longer. Makes it harder to detect early on. It's stealthy in that phase.
Oh, okay. Sneaking in close. But then, I remember reading something about a speed change.
That's the dramatic part. In the terminal phase, as it gets close to the target, it apparently accelerates, like way up over Mach 3, supersonic.
Mach 3, wow. So that final sprint.
That's designed to slash the reaction time, even for advanced systems like the Aegis radars on those Arleigh Burkes and Atagos. The idea is to punch through the defenses before they can effectively react.
Okay, that makes sense. But still, why actually name the Arleigh Burke and the Atago? That's so pointed.
It is very pointed, and I think that's the message. By naming them, the plan is projecting, a lot of confidence.
Confidence in the missile itself.
In the missile, yes, but probably also in their crews, their training, their whole targeting system. They seem to be signaling, we believe this works against these specific, highly capable threats.
Now, you mentioned a U.S. presence. This whole display wasn't happening in isolation, was it?
Not at all. On the very same day, April 26th, the U.S. Navy was also active nearby.
What were they doing?
The USS William P. Lawrence, which is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, interestingly enough, conducted a freedom of navigation passage, a phono-P, through the Taiwan Strait.
Ah, the Taiwan Strait. Always a sensitive area. So the U.S. is asserting navigation rights.
Standard procedure for them, asserting the right to transit international waters. But the timing, alongside the plan's display, it's quite the juxtaposition.
How did the plan react to the phono-P itself?
Well, officially, Senior Colonel Shi from the Eastern Theater Command said the U.S. ship was monitored. He mentioned lawful countermeasures were in place, but didn't really elaborate on what those were.
Vague countermeasures. But they did something else too, didn't they?
They did. Unusually, the plan released actual footage of the USS William P. Lawrence during its transit. That's not something they do often.
Releasing footage, that definitely feels like turning up the heat. Visually, at least. A counter-signal.
Exactly. It adds to the tension. And then you had the political statements coming out of Beijing shortly after.
Right. What was that?
The Ministry of National Defense spokesman, Zheng Xiang, he condemned what Beijing calls encouragement of Taiwan independence. He framed the U.S. actions as undermining peace.
And the U.S. response. Predictable, I imagine.
Pretty much. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command called the transit routine, emphasizing international law and freedom of navigation. Then Senior Colonel Shi Yi followed up, accusing the U.S. of, quote, distorting facts and using provocative rhetoric.
Okay, so the usual diplomatic back and forth. But going back to the plan's display, what are the experts saying about why they'd be so open about targeting specific ships now?
Well, one expert, Wang Yinan from Beihang University, made an interesting point. She noted the plan has usually been quite conservative, quite reserved in its public communications.
Yeah, that's been my impression too.
So this very explicit naming, she suggests, might indicate a strong internal consensus within the plan. A shared belief, maybe, in the YJ-18A's effectiveness, and perhaps their overall defensive setup.
So it's not just about this one missile then, it's a broader picture.
That seems to be the thinking. Another voice, Wang Fang from the China Times, argued this confidence likely stems from their whole layered anti-access area denial system, A2AD, as it's known.
A2AD. Remind us what that involves.
It's basically a strategy to keep potential adversaries, like naval forces, far away from China's shores. It uses a whole range of things, not just cruise missiles like the YJ-18A.
What?
Things like anti-ship ballistic missiles, the DF-21D, the DF-26,
Yeah.
it's called carrier killers, and newer hypersonic weapons too, like the DF-17 or the ship-launched YJ-21. The YJ-18A is just one piece, one layer in that bigger defensive puzzle.
Okay, so it fits into a larger strategy. Now, if we compare the YJ-18A directly, say, to the main U.S. anti-ship missile, the Harpoon,
Yeah.
how do they stack up?
Well, there's a pretty significant difference on paper. The YJ-18A is credited with a much longer range, maybe up to 600 kilometers, and it has that supersonic terminal phase we talked about.
And the Harpoon?
The basic Harpoon has a much shorter range, maybe around 130 kilometers, and it's subsonic the whole way. Stays below the speed of sound.
So even if the U.S. has upgraded versions of the Harpoon...
Right. Even upgraded Harpoons might struggle against the kind of defenses on these newer Chinese ships. Think about the ship that hosted the display, the Type 052D. It's got close-in weapon systems like the 1130 CIWS.
CIWS, that's the rapid-fire Gatling gun thing. Last line of defense.
Exactly. That plus short-range air defense missiles like the HQ-10. So the theory is a Type 052D armed with the YJ-18A could potentially launch an attack on an Arleigh Burke from outside the range of the Burke's own Harpoons.
That's a potential capability gap, then. It feels like this isn't just about missiles, but about the ships themselves, the platforms.
Oh, absolutely. And that display board didn't just feature the YJ-18A, it also highlighted the Type 055 destroyer.
The Type 055, that's their big one, right? The cruiser-sized destroyer.
You go around 10,000 tons, maybe more. It's a symbol of China's push towards a true blue-water Navy one that can operate globally far from home. Highlighting it alongside the missile and the targeting info, it sends a message about growing capability.
And targeting both U.S. and Japanese ships, the Otago class. That feels significant, too.
It does. It underscores the regional competition. Japan, obviously, is a key U.S. ally, and its Navy, the JMSDF, is very capable. Targeting their top-tier destroyers alongside U.S. ones signals the plan sees this as a broader strategic challenge.
Especially with Japan's location being part of that first island chain.
Exactly. That chain running from Japan through Okinawa down past Taiwan towards the Philippines is strategically vital. Japan's role there adds another layer of complexity to the whole security picture in the Western Pacific.
And of course, you can't talk about this region without talking about Taiwan.
No, it looms over everything. China's position is clear. It views Taiwan as part of its territory and hasn't ruled out force. The U.S. and Japan don't recognize Taiwan independence, but strongly oppose any unilateral change to the status quo by force.
So this naval display, the Hufanopi, it's all tangled up with the Taiwan situation.
Deeply intertwined. Naval power, freedom of navigation, signaling intentions, it's all playing out against that backdrop.
So given this very public, very pointed display by the plan, what are the immediate reactions? What are we seeing in response?
Well, we're already hearing that the U.S. Navy and Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force are planning to step up their joint exercises. More cooperation.
What kind of exercises?
Things like anti-submarine warfare drills, integrated air defense training, basically working together more closely to enhance interoperability. It's about showing resolve, demonstrating they can operate effectively together in that environment.
A direct response to show they're not intimidated, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And it's not just the navies themselves. You can bet defense contractors are paying close attention.
How so?
Well, this kind of development fuels arguments for modernization. In the U.S., there'll likely be renewed pushes to upgrade the Arleigh Burke destroyers, maybe better radars, faster interceptor missiles. Japan will likely look at enhancing their Otago-class ships, too.
And China. Are they likely to pause their buildup?
Doesn't seem like it. They're continuing to build more Type A055s, and reports suggest they're working on their next-generation submarines, the Type 096 class. This kind of signaling event often just reinforces existing trends in defense spending and development.
It really does make you think about how quickly naval technology and strategy are evolving.
Absolutely. And we haven't even really touched on things like unmanned systems yet. Unmanned surface vessels, AI-driven targeting, those could change the game even more dramatically in the coming years.
True. That's a whole other layer of complexity coming down the line.
It is. Both sides are investing heavily in that kind of tech. The whole maritime security landscape in East Asia is just going to get more complex, I think.
So if we try to synthesize this overt targeting by the plan, what's the real takeaway here?
I think the main thing is this shift away from, let's say, strategic ambiguity towards something much more explicit, openly naming specific potential adversaries and their key assets like this. It's a strong signal.
A signal of what? Confidence.
Confidence, yes. Confidence in their technology like the YJ-18A, confidence in their training, and maybe confidence in their overall strategic position. It really highlights how rapidly China's naval modernization is changing the balance of power, or at least perceptions of it, in the Western Pacific.
A very deliberate move, then, with potentially far-reaching consequences. It really makes you wonder, how does this kind of explicit signaling, this move away from keeping things somewhat veiled, impact the delicate balance needed for peace and stability? What does it mean for deterrence when the threats become so openly stated in a world brimming with advanced technology? Definitely something to keep a close eye on.